Can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, what I wanted to talk to everyone about today is extracurriculars and why they're important. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because I was thinking about it. And I think that I've always been someone who really loves to learn. But a lot of what I enjoyed about my university experience wasn't actually even in the classroom. It was a lot of things I did outside the classroom. So today I'll talk to you about some of those activities and I'll talk about why extracurriculars are important, what tertiary institutions can offer you in terms of extracurriculars, other community activities and events you could do. I'll also talk about hackathons and I'll talk about side projects and I'll finish off by talking about a few things that I found could potentially go wrong and how you might manage them. So, to start off with, why do extracurriculars matter? There's so many reasons, but I wanted to highlight a couple of the ones that mean the most to me. Firstly, you get to apply what you learned in class. So often we learn things in class that I think are quite theoretical, but then when you go and do a project or you go and do some extracurricular, you actually get an appreciation for how you use it in the real world and why that matters. And when you're doing that, you can also identify a lot of assumptions you made along the way that weren't obvious. Because I think when you're learning in class, you're often learning to do an exam. So you learn in a certain way. But when you're doing the project, you do it in the physical context. So that can illuminate new things for you. And on top of that, super excitingly, you get to learn so many new things. And this includes lots of new technical skills and critically, also a lot of soft skills, working with people, managing conflict, working in time constraints and resource constraints was a really big one for me. You get to develop all of that. You can also do a lot of networking. So, a lot of student societies often run their own networking nights or they have sponsors, and it's a great opportunity to talk to them, learn what their experiences are, and see what you could do in future. And also, you just get to make new friends, which is great, and you might actually go on to work with some of them, or you might not. But either way, making friends is good. And something that really resonates with me is that I feel like doing extracurriculars really helped me to carve out my own interests. I think that, especially when I started university, I was trying to do, I was always trying to do what I thought was the next best thing, whatever I perceived best to mean at the time. But when I did extracurriculars, I got a sense that I could be more deliberate about what I was doing with my time and do things that I found meaning in and that I really enjoyed. And I was able to develop that sense because I tried so many new things and found that, hey, I enjoy this thing. I really like when I do this thing. And if I hadn't done that, then I think that I sort of still would have been in a pattern of doing or applying for a range of things that maybe are really interesting, but I was doing because I felt like I had to in some way. So that was really important to me as well. And I want to share this quote with you all because I really like it by Dr. Barbara Oakley, who is a professor of engineering. And she also does a lot of work on learning how to learn well, which I'm really interested in. And in her TED Talk, she says to not just follow your passions, but to broaden them. And I share this with you all today because I think when I was, especially in high school, I had this sense that I needed to have a dream or a passion and one thing that really resonates with me that I was going to pursue in my life. But that can be a lot of pressure. It's really hard. What I found instead is that personally, I've always liked to have my feet in multiple buckets and be doing lots of different things that may or may not be related. And that's something I've really enjoyed. So I would absolutely encourage everyone to go and do things you're interested in and enjoy without always needing to regard what it means for you. So now I'll talk about the first sort of avenue for doing extracurricular activities. And for a lot of us, that's probably tertiary institutions. And I want to point out that I've noticed that there's a range of different extracurricular activities you can do. Firstly, there's a range of non-technical student teams, and I found that broadly they can be classed into teams that develop some kind of resources and events for particular student cohorts. So, for example, I know at my university there is a software engineering student society, or there's teams that contribute to social causes that you might want to be a part of because it's something you're really passionate about. And on the other hand, there's also technical student teams that are working to build and design some kind of technological solutions. Some of them are also participating in competitions, which is a really cool opportunity if that's something you're interested in. Something I've noticed about this sort of balance between non-technical and technical student teams is that I found a lot of students start off in some kind of non-technical team to develop their confidence and then move into a technical team. That is certainly a path you can take if that is what you want to do. There, I would say that non-technical teams have a range of benefits on their own. Um, you don't you don't need to use it as a stepping stone, which I feel like a lot of people do. Though you can, it's not a bad idea. And I also want to point out that there are lots of student teams outside your faculty. And so, for example, for me, most of the teams that I've been a part of are associated with the engineering faculty, but I've also been a part of some teams that are associated with the business and commerce faculties. And so I did a couple of consulting projects, which was a really interesting experience for me because I got to work on a whole lot of things that I otherwise wouldn't have. This can supplement your academic study, but it doesn't have to. Sometimes it's just fun to do things because you're interested in them. So I was a part of a book club. I used to do slam poetry. I also did some playwriting for my university and just doing a range of things that I wanted to do at the time. I also wanted to point out that there are a range of free TAFE courses you can do. I know that there's one in cybersecurity and one in information technology. If you are interested, the people I know who've done them have done them part-time across 12 to 24 months. And this can be a good way to get some kind of overview of things that you otherwise wouldn't have covered in class because it's already structured for you. The caveat to the TAFE courses, though, is that you do have to be an Australian citizen or permanent resident or a New Zealand citizen living in Australia to do them for free. So that's something to be aware of. The last thing I want to say about this is if you're not sure what your tertiary institution student teams are, they probably have a web page for it. Or if they don't, because I notice some universities don't, a great way to find out can be to go to their orientation week events. Usually they talk about them and promote them to students there, if that's something you're interested in. The next thing I want to talk about is a range of sort of organizations you could keep up with in the community. I really like doing this because not only do I come across a range of, I guess, opportunities and events and content that I otherwise wouldn't have, but it's also really inspiring to see all the good work that's being done. And so I'll tell you a bit about some of them. So Bricks for Kids and RoboKids, they both run robotics workshops for school students. This is mostly focused around block coding, and they do take on student mentors. Some of those positions are paid, some of them are volunteer based. It's a great opportunity to do some teaching, practice actually explaining the content you've learnt in a really simple way, which is really good for your learning anyway. And it's also lots of fun working with the robots. I haven't worked with RoboKids before, but I did work with Bricks for Kids for a while. And they gave us all the resources in terms of the content we needed to deliver, solutions. So it's really guided and they operate in various states. So definitely check if that's available to you. The next one I wanted to mention is Code Like a Girl. They do offer an intern matching program you can apply for, and they also have a virtual summit coming up next week if you are interested. I think they have a $20.
I'm still on the first slide. Are you moving slides?
Yes, it's working.
Yes.
It's fine. I see all your logos.
You see them, and it's just me then. Okay. Carry on. Don't let me interrupt.
Just to make sure, can everyone else see the logos? Yes, okay.
Yes,
I'll
I can see.
Yeah. Yeah, so they have that virtual summit coming up, which can be a good networking opportunity if you're interested. I also wanted to talk about the Australian Women in Security Network. A lot of their work I find is more targeted toward professionals, but they have a range of free webinars and other events that can be a great learning opportunity if you're interested. Tech Leading Ladies is similar, more targeted towards professionals, but they also run free monthly meetups that also operate virtually. I think the next one is on creative problem solving. So if they're delivering some content you're interested in, it's worth having a watch. And then there's a range of organizations like Girl Geek Academy, Code Camp, She Codes. They all provide some kind of coding workshop to students, and they take on usually university students to be mentors. Again, curriculum and solutions are typically provided. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely worth looking into. I also want to point out Engineers Without Borders. They do a lot of events related to humanitarian engineering, including hackathons and other range of things. Typically, they are associated with universities, but you can also sign up to volunteer at a state or national level. If you check their website, they often have some kind of postings open. I also quickly want to talk about ASAR, which is the Australia Information Security Association. Again, a bit more targeted toward professionals, I feel, but I found that they do encourage students to sign up as volunteers to help with their conference, which is coming up in November. That is something I did recently, and I also found out that you may be entitled to a free membership through your university. So definitely worth checking out. And lastly, Engineers Australia. They are the national body for engineering, which you may be interested in if you're a software engineering student too. They host a range of networking events you could attend. They have a job board, and you can also volunteer to host their stalls if that's something you're interested in. I'll go on to the next point now, which is about hackathons. Hackathons can be so much fun, and I wanted to share a few things that I've sort of come to reflect on about hackathons. Firstly, the hackathons I enjoyed the most were the ones where there was some kind of mentoring and training. I've done hackathons before where they even had training about the particular content that the hackathon related to, which was really useful for me because I was really nervous otherwise, and I had a lot of fun doing that. So that's something to look out for. I'd also say if you're going to do a hackathon, don't be afraid to sign up on your own. I found most of them usually have a system of pairing together people who've signed up on their own. So it's really not a big issue. And if you do know your team beforehand, if you can, definitely recommend preparing your environment beforehand and do use code templates, app starter kits. You don't have to build from the ground up. It is okay. Having said that, challenge yourself to use new technology. I think that is sort of the big purpose of hackathons in a way. If you get exposed to something new, you can go look at it more yourself later, and that's a great experience to have. Also, practice pitching and get feedback. Don't skimp on this. Ultimately, if you've built a great product, if you can't communicate that well, it's not super valuable. And also, stay connected with the people you meet, with your mentors, with your team members. Um, it can be really helpful going forward, and it's nice to maintain those relationships. I do have a link at the bottom right where I keep up with hackathons that are coming up. I've personally done the Sydney University Humanitarian Innovation Hackathon a couple of times. I really like that one. And I've also done the Engineers Without Borders hackathon a couple of times because I really enjoy that one too. But there's heaps there you can look into. And if you're interested, you could be a mentor yourself, which is another option. I also want to quickly talk about side projects. Everyone says you should build something you're interested in. I feel like when I started, I did not know what I was interested in. That was really hard. So I put some links there where you can look at a bunch of project ideas to help you get started. The other thing I did when I started with side projects is I followed walkthroughs. I personally found that when I was doing something new and I had no idea what to do, it was really debilitating for me. Being able to go through walkthroughs to start with really helped me to build my confidence so that I could then later go and approach challenges that I was more unsure about without the walkthrough. Once I was sort of okay with the walkthroughs, I moved on to more step-by-step guides. I found the Cloud Resume Challenge was a really good sort of example of that. It essentially gets you to code your resume and host it on the cloud, which is really good learning because I think most of us don't really learn too much about the cloud at university. And I also want to say, if you don't know where to start, I recommend understanding the architecture of your system, what the key components are, and how they interact. I found a lot of my confusion is coming from that, the misunderstanding. You can also examine how similar systems are built and specify your key features and work backwards. I found that a lot more useful than going the other way, because the other way is a lot more elusive. If you start with, okay, I need to have a title here, then you can go and find out how to do that. If you start with, I need to build a web page, then that's a whole rabbit hole, and that can get really complicated. I very quickly will mention open source projects as well. This can be a good way to get into projects without taking on too much complexity. Firstly, you want to make sure that the project you're working on is trustworthy, and you mostly want to make sure it has an open source license. You also want to make sure that it does have an active community so you are supported when you're doing your work. Once you've vetted it and you make sure it's a good project for you to do, go through the README file, go through any tutorials, sample output, understand what the project is doing, and then simple steps you can take to start contributing include elaborating on the README, resolving any open issues, and improving the folder structure. I have put a couple of links at the bottom right that take you through a few guides and also some sort of beginner-friendly open source projects you could contribute to if you are interested. I'll finish off by saying that sometimes when you're doing these things because it's new, you might feel like it's really challenging and you don't know what to do. I would say discomfort is really normal. I found that with coding, when I started, I felt like coding was the end goal, but I found that it's really not. A lot of the work in coding happens before you've actually coded anything. A lot of the time is spent planning how to build a good system that is reliable. And so do those things that will help you to think about the architecture of your systems before you build them. Try doing test-driven development, set up those CI/CD pipelines, and develop your debugging skills too. I used to feel so afraid to read error messages, but you should read them and you should search them up and understand what they mean. Don't sort of look at the red and jump away. I also found that sometimes when student teams, time and resource constraints meant that I couldn't do all the things I wanted to do, and I found it really disheartening. But I feel like there's still inherent value in the ideas you come up with, even if they're not realistic in the time frame you have. Do what you can and don't neglect what you can't. You can still document the idea and move on. Finally, you might experience some teamwork challenges. If you do, you should voice them. Share that I think the team could be doing this thing differently. I think this dynamic isn't working well for us. But also, sometimes I do think you have to know when you're playing a losing game. Ultimately, as a student, there is only so much you can do. And you may have to compromise on what your ideals are in terms of working in a team. But that's sort of how teamwork goes. That is okay. And that's all from me. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I am happy to take any questions. I'm sorry I went a little bit over time.
We have to let them jump to the next call. That starts exactly now. But if anyone is not going into the next call and would like to stay and ask Afia questions, then she'll hang around on this call. I have to jump to the next one to open that up for you all. So stay if you can. Otherwise, I'll see you in the other one. But thanks, Afia. That was marvellous.
Did a good job. Great talk.
Thank you.
No worries. So dark.
Yeah, if anyone does have questions, I'm happy to answer, or we can just head up.
I have a question. How do you manage your time with the uni work and also this extracurricular activities? I think that's a lot.
That's a really good question. I will point out it's not like I was doing all of these things at the same time. These are sort of things that I did sometimes throughout my university experience. Doing it all at once would certainly be a lot of work, and I wouldn't recommend it. You probably wouldn't have enough time to really process everything in a meaningful way if you were trying to do that anyway. So, for example, when I was in my first year and I was very new to everything, all I was doing was I had joined one student team. Sorry, just a moment. I think the recording will be on YouTube later, so you will be able to see it there, Marie. And sorry, back to your question. I had only joined just one student team. I was helping them run some workshops maybe once or twice a month, and I did one project that all it was really doing was generating an email based on some details that a user inputted. So it's not a lot of work, but as I built my skills, I was more able to do things. And a lot of the things I said, they're like, a hackathon is an event. You do it for the weekend and then it's done. It's not an ongoing effort. So you might need to do some planning beforehand. Okay, I have this assignment coming up the week after. I don't have the weekend, so I need to do it before. But it is a one-off. So I think if you're interested, you can definitely make it work for your schedule. With side projects as well, you can pretty much do it however you want. I think how I did most of mine was I would try to do a feature a week, which I found more manageable, especially because when I'm learning new things, I just felt so nervous, and that slowed me down on its own. But yeah, I hope that somewhat helps. I wasn't doing all of this at one time.
Can
I
I add a
think
little bit?
that helps. Yeah. Thanks. That was a really good presentation. Learned a lot. Good info.
I'm so glad.
With learning as well, you don't have to, like, it doesn't have to be a job. It could be fun. Like if you actually find something you're interested in, then that can be your recreational time. You know, like a lot of people in IT, their hobby turns into their passion, which turns into their job, right? So they get all this accelerated learning just because they're having fun. And so if that's kind of, if there's an area where you're excited, then, you know, instead of scrolling TikTok or Instagram or YouTube or whatever it is, spend that time learning about what you're interested in, and your downtime. And then you're kind of getting that fun as well as getting the thing. I mean, I know that like my whole life revolved around computers when I was much younger than I am now, but it was like a hobby which turned into the job. So yeah. And all of the best security people I know and all of the best coders I know, they code because they love it, not because their job pays them to do it. Yeah.
Kevin, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, that was a great presentation. I have a question about, I guess, how you got your internship. Did you do any projects prior to your internship application? And if you did, could you share like one or two of them?
So I definitely did projects prior to my internship application. I didn't specifically do them for the application, but so I'll tell you what I did. One of the projects that I worked on was a data sensitivity scanner. The reason I worked on that project was because at the placement I did before this, the project I worked on was about sensitivity scanning, and that was really interesting to me. And so I wanted to know sort of how that system worked. But what I do want to say is that I did write down I did that project on my resume, but in the interview, I don't think I really talked about. I don't think I actually talked about any of the projects I did individually. I just, I wasn't really, I was asked about projects. I didn't actually opt to speak about that. I mostly spoke about what I did at work. That was a coincidence, though. What I mean to say is most of what I was asked was about if this happened, what would you do? It was more sort of theoretical. So I'm saying that because don't feel like you have to go and do so many projects for your interview. That's not the feeling I got. The questions that I was asked were more about soft skills and how I would respond in particular situations. So absolutely go and do projects about things you're interested in, but with that caveat. Is
So
that
basically,
helpful?
yeah, so basically, I guess put projects that you've already done that not related to whatever you're applying for, and anything that I guess interests you, but I guess don't like focus on it too much. I guess is probably what I'm getting out of that.
If you've done something related, I think you should definitely put it down. Don't not put it down. All
Yeah.
I'm trying to say is that so with this role, when it said cloud solutions architect, I hadn't really even worked with the cloud before, not really. So I felt like I didn't have anything that was super related, and I'm new to security, but the projects that I've done, I think I still have a lot of transferable skills. Things like um, things like being creative, being able to solve a problem, that applies to anything you ever work on. That's what I'm saying. If you've done something relevant and you know that, oh, I want to work in security so I'm going to go and do security related projects, that's fantastic. But it may not happen, and that's okay. That's all I was trying to say. Yeah.
Having the project there means that you can talk about it. And if it was one that you had fun doing, the way you talk about it will different and it will be different and it will really share your personality. So like when Afia is talking now, she lights up. And that's the sort of thing that people in interviews want to see when you're talking about something with a bit of passion and enthusiasm, because that's the energy people want in their teams, right? Like if you're talking about something that you felt sort of whipped to do, then you're not going to be excited to talk about it. And then they're going to be like, well, this isn't an enthusiastic person, right? So there's lots of little things. So yeah, I need to drop off for my next meeting, but it's been nice to meet you all. Bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah. Yeah, I hope those answers are helpful. If you want to
Yeah,
ask
it's
me
helpful.
anything else, I have time. So I'm happy to talk about it.
Well, I guess if you have time, how many, I guess, places you applied for? Is this your first internship?
No, so this is actually my third internship. I did two before. One of them was arranged through my university, so they have an IBL program, and how it works is we do a range of interviews with our IT faculty's partners, and hopefully you get placed. That's the idea. Most people do get placed. So that's the placement where I worked on the sensitivity scanning, which was pretty cool. Before that, I also did a research placement at an immunology lab. And that was through CSIRO. So I applied online, and yeah, I was able to work on some data modeling for 6 months, which was really cool. So I've done a couple of different ones to this point.